Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. This is KLOS New and Approved. I'm so excited to have my guest today. An incredible blues guitarist and an amazing human being as well with some of the things that he's done. Been a fan of his for many a year, and I'm going to be talking to him right now. That's Joe Bonamassa. Joe, it's great to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. One of the things that people don't know is you narrated my first EPK like 20 years ago.
Yeah, that was great.
And it was great, man. I'm just honored to be on your program. I'm honored to be playing a full capacity concert at the Greek Theater, going back home and playing to the hometown fans. And it's been good. It's been really good.
I'm excited about it. I mean, Joe, you've had such an incredible career. It's great to finally get to interview you here and talk about some of the things that have been happening. I mean, the new record is called Now Serving, and that's Royalty. It's live from the Ryman Auditorium, which is where you're actually at right now while we're talking in Nashville. Tell me about that concert, because there's some great songs on there, but also you were doing something for charity when you were doing this concert. You're raising money for out of musicians.
Like everybody, we did live streams, and we kind of did it a little bit differently. We sold $100 VIP packages, and a lot of that money went to charity. And what you did get, you got a cardboard cutout of yourself, and we stuck like 2,200 of them at the Ryman. And there was no audience, there was no applause, so it was kind of weird to play like that. But a lot of that money that we raised went to this program called Fueling Musicians, which is part of our Keeping the Blues Alive charity. And we raised last year over $500,000 and gave it away in either gas cards or cash. And it helped pay a lot of people's mortgages. It helped pay a lot of bills for a lot of folks. That really had the rug ripped out from under them, in March, thinking they would be back by the summer. And I just kept going, summer of what year, and we know, a lot of musicians are great artists, but not great fiscal planners. And sometimes that gets in the way. And I know a lot of people were struggling, but we were happy to help. I mean, I've been very fortunate in the music business and in a position where we could move the needle for some folks.
That was a great thing for you to do, and a great live album came out of it. And I want to talk to you about your most recent studio album. It's your 24th number one record on the Billboard Blues chart, which is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
When you think about that, right? 24, it's like that number is incredible. But that record, can we talk about recording that at Abbey Road? And one of the things that was so cool when I saw what you were doing there was working with Pete Brown, the original lyricist who worked with Cream. So I wanted to ask you what that was like when it came down to working together. Jules Holland, such a great piano and keyboard player. Great group of guys. Bernie Marsden, right, from Whitesnake. Yeah. Everybody that was involved in that project, super talented. So tell me about how you got that great crew together.
Okay, the whole thing started with a session that I did for a label, and they were making a record called Acoustic Cream, which I'm not even sure it's out yet. And it was a Ginger Baker record. And I found myself in Abbey Road Studio B on a day off when we were in London. And I was there with my friend Bernie Marsden and Pete Brown and the late, great Ginger Baker, who, if you've ever seen the movie, he was as advertised.
Yeah, Beware Mr. Baker was an incredible documentary. He was out of his mind, but he was brilliant, though.
It is, and he's one of the greatest drummers of all time. He's a Buddy Rich level, John Bonham level, drummer. But his personality was as advertised. That movie was real. I can tell you it was real because I lived it for about 6 hours.
I can only imagine. I gotta say, Joe, I met the filmmaker who, before I ever saw the film, explained to me that Ginger Baker broke his nose with a cane, which was unbelievable.
I believe it. And it was funny because on that session, he was walked in by his assistant, and he sat down at the drums, and we were supposed to play Sunshine of Your Love, and we were all just kind of sitting there, and there was a lot of camera people around. There was a lot of people, it was a studio session, but we were certainly not ready to record yet. He sits down at the drums, and he plays the opening fill to Sunshine of Your Love, first of all, you're going, oh my God, that's, you've heard it played by many, many drummers, but not him,
Yeah.
And you go, that's it. But then he thought we were recording and threw the drumsticks down and then let off a few, expletives and like, where are you guys? I thought we were recording this. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to get interesting. And it was great by the end. He kind of warmed up to all of us. And Bernie Marsden was really the glue because Bernie had befriended him, or at least made multiple attempts to get him to calm down. And for me, it was really special because it put me in the room with Pete Brown, who I've known for a while, and Bernie, and it completed the trilogy, so to speak, of I had made music and played with all three members of Cream, Eric, Jack Bruce, and then Ginger Baker. While we were on a break, Bernie and I and Pete Brown hatched this idea to write and record a record in the UK. And I said, well, why don't we do it here? And they're like, okay. And then I ran it up, ran it up the flagpole at the management in the record company, which is our company. And it just seemed like a great idea. And 6 months later, we were at Abbey Road, and Pete wrote some great lyrics. He was ill at the time, but he just kept sending me page after page of great beatnik poetry like he would write with Jack. And Bernie and I would kind of either put music to it or come up with some other stuff on our own. Next thing you know, January into February 2020, we made this record. And it was a great time in my life. I was so thrilled to finally do this thing that I've dreamed about. And I didn't have a clue that in the next 90 days, life as we knew it would be completely different.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of talk about this virus thing that was happening, but it wasn't scaling, and it wasn't even a conversation. It was just a matter of fact that we were just doing this, and then we were going to go tour on it, and we had all these plans for 2020. By March 12th, it was very apparent that life was changing rapidly for a guy who had spent the last almost 30 years on the road. So I'm very proud of the record. We haven't toured it yet. We're going to start in a couple weeks, in a couple weeks. And the other thing is, we have another record in the can that we recorded in New York during the pandemic. So we have two new records that we have yet to tour. So it's exciting to reboot the show and have all this new material to play for fans that really haven't heard it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear that stuff live. That must have been fun, really, like writing with Pete Brown, just because, loving those records like we did growing up, like, things like Disraeli Gears, Wheels of Fire, all those records, even Goodbye Cream, Fresh. There's so many great songs. And I love the fact, too, that you played with the late, great Jack Bruce, because, that guy what a voice, too, right?
What a voice, what a musician, what a bass player.
Yeah.
I always said this about Glenn Hughes as well. He's known as the voice of rock and this great singer. But if you listen to Glenn play bass, it's like amazing. It's like, it's like Andy Frazier and Glenn has his own style. But the same thing with Jack Bruce. It's that bass playing. It's that style that when we hear those Cream records, those records would sound a lot different without that style of bass playing. It's like all three of those guys, Eric, Ginger, and Jack, made the perfect trilogy of musicians that was perfect for that music. You know what I mean? Eric was more of the minimalist, and Ginger, he was more of the jazz drummer, and so was Jack. Jack approached it from more of like a Charles Mingus point of view than a James Jamerson point of view. So when you get all three of them together, there was this explosion of great playing that was so unique that really made that band so relevant even today. They're just as relevant today as they were 50 years ago, and we're still chasing it.
We got to talk about also, you and I have a mutual love for Free. There's in fact, I almost surprised you with a Free T-shirt that I have, but it was just
right.
It's a little tight on me right now. But I love Free, and you've done some incredible stuff by Free. You know what I mean? Walk in My Shadow. Song of Yesterday. The stuff that you covered. obviously you were a big Paul Kossoff fan, and really everybody in that band. Simon, Andy, you just mentioned, and I love your version that you and Paul did from the Beacon of Fire and Water.
Yes.
I mean, it's a killer version of that. Tell me how you loved and discovered Free, because they're just a band that I believe are, unsung. I mean, they're underrated. I know musicians love them, but they deserve so much more credit.
100%. And every time I have an audience, I have several friends that are on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Every time I have an audience with them and they're paying for dinner, I always guilt them into this notion of like, how can Free not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when All Right Now is one of the most played rock and roll songs in the history of AOR classic rock radio.
Yeah.
And, most people know Free from that song, but there's so much deeper than that. I got turned on to Free by the late, great Pete Way from UFO.
There's a band I love, too. Those guys were great.
UFO, yes.
I saw that. I saw that Lights Out tour when I was a kid. It was great. I love those albums.
And I mean, talk about a wonderful British rock band. I mean, and not a lot of people know this about me, but when I was 18 years old, right before I met you, and started on like my full-time solo career, I auditioned for UFO in the late 90s. They were looking for a guitar player to replace Michael Schenker, who I think they'd have another falling out. There was a love-hate relationship there. And I traveled from upstate New York to Columbus, Ohio, and I auditioned in Pete Way's basement with Jerry Shirley on drums from Humble Pie, another great band.
There you go, right?
Right, so I'm 18 years old. I got a flying V, and we're playing Lights Out and just whatever. And Pete goes to me about halfway through the audition, and we're having a great time. Ultimately, the gig went to Vinnie Moore, which he was way more right for that gig than I was. Pete goes, "You sound like Paul Kossoff. Your vibrato's like Paul." I'm like, what's a Paul Kossoff? And he made me a tape of the best of Free. And it was just two sides on a Max L tape, and I played it in the car on the way back, and my life was changed. I mean, you're hearing songs of yesterday, you're hearing Walk in My Shadow, you're hearing, and it's just this wonderfully simple but devastatingly effective power trio with a lead singer. And that just set me on this journey of really being a dilettante of the British blues art form, because I really, really dug their take on things. It was just, between them and the Jeff Beck group, with Rod Stewart singing, and Humble Pie, and John Mayall's records with Mick Taylor, Peter Green, obviously Clapton. I was just like, man, this is tough blues, and I liked it. And and a lot of times those guys and those bands were my conduit to the original masters. I was hearing Howlin' Wolf covers before I was really into Howlin' Wolf, and I was hearing Freddie King covers before I was into Freddie King, and that's how kids in the suburbs discovered the blues. It was through rock records that were really just amped up, blues albums. And, I thought Fleetwood Mac was, Rumors before I discovered
Peter Green, right? Yeah.
Peter Green,
heard things like Albatross and Oh Well, and Green Monolici and all those great songs, man, right?
Yeah, and they had great songs. They were in London. They were young kids. There was not a care in the world, and they were all trying to be either Jimi Hendrix or kind of outdo each other in a friendly way. And that camaraderie among the bands really made for a wonderful snapshot of great music between like the years 1966 and 1971. You're just like, everybody was there, and they were just going, well, it's Cream one day, it's Fleetwood Mac the next day, it's Free had their hit. Jeff Beck group comes out a year before Zeppelin. It's kind of the blueprint of what Zeppelin was doing. And I even put Jimi Hendrix, even though he's from Seattle, into that category because Chaz Chandler brought him to London, and he exploded on the London scene with two British musicians. So
Right, yeah.
he was part of that as well, and the Who, and it's the usual suspects. But imagine they're all playing at the same time in a small island in the North Atlantic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to think that all the stuff we still play and talk about today was generated in a very short period of time.
It is amazing. Those records are so great. It's funny when you talk about free. Songs like I'll Be Creepin', which is, like just out, like the sparseness, but it's just so cool. Or a ballad like Oh, I Wept. I love that. It's just one of the song is unbelievable. It's just one of my favorites. So I love that we have that mutual love for that and that all that music, which is really cool. It's I wish more people understood the Peter Green era as well of Fleetwood Mac. I think they're starting to, which is good. More people are finding out when they're digging a little deeper.
Yeah, and how Peter Green fit into John Mayall's band. I interviewed John for my little podcast, and John would say, like, it wasn't like Eric Clapton left the band and then Peter Green got the gig full time. They would like swap seats. Like Eric would go to Greece for something and be playing with other musicians, and then John needed a replacement, so he called Peter. And then when Eric would come back to England, John would go, well, Eric draws more people. Then Peter Green he started Fleetwood Mac, and then both of them started these gigantic bands. And then Mick Taylor shows up based on a strip ad in Melody Maker magazine, going John Mayall looking for guitar player. Then talk about a 1, 2, 3 punch. You're like going, you found three of the greatest right there. But he just needed a guitar player, and. It was, again, it's that like necessity is mother of invention, and it was just just really a cool period of time that it could not be recreated today.
Yeah, it's amazing. I also got to talk to you about the stuff you do with Beth Hart. Tell me about your relationship and how you and Beth Hart started working together. It's like my girlfriend loves all of your Beth Hart records with you and her, and she was.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The inspiration for the Beth Hart stuff started when I purchased on iTunes, back when you could purchase stuff, and then it kind of went away. But I purchased the Get Your Yayas Out collection that they reissued about 10 or 11 years ago. I don't know, probably 2010 or 2009. And the reason why I purchased it was because they included the opening acts, which included Ike and Tina Turner, and the protagonist for me was B.B. King, which is probably the greatest version of Please Accept My Love that he ever sang. And you can hear Bill Graham getting him back for the encore, and he just kills it. While I was listening to the Ike and Tina set, fresh in my mind was a gig that I did with Beth Hart in Lucerne, Switzerland. And her manager came up to me. He's like, "So what do you think?" And I said, "This is awesome. It's like watching Big Brother in the holding company." And he smiled and he nodded and he goes, "Yeah, we get that a lot." And like a punk kid with 2 chips on his shoulders, I go, "I wasn't giving you a compliment," and I wasn't giving you a compliment at all. Yeah. And he goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "It's awesome, but the cast is not the same. It's not as good as your singer." And so we reached out to her and asked her if she'd be interested in doing kind of like a take on what Ike and Tina did in the late 60s and early 70s, where they were playing Proud Mary, they were playing Come Together, they were playing all these, they were doing Beatles, they were doing covers. It was like a show band review.
Yeah, Nutbush City Limits, that was such a great song. Which of course you guys did, which I love. I even love that Bob Seger live, and the Silver Bullet Band did a great version of it years ago.
Yeah, and they were doing a show band review, and it was just so devastatingly good. You didn't realize that they didn't write the songs, and they just did cool takes on great songs. And I got with my producer Kevin Shirley, and we talked to Beth and her husband Scott and her manager David, and asked this like, let's try this. Let's just get in the studio for a couple of days. And let's put together an A team of players, pick some songs, and we got your back, Beth. We got everything that you need. All the players are here. We're all in a support role. And we got together at the Village Studio Recorders and the Village Recorders in Santa Monica, and we made this record called "Don't Explain," and it was done in like 4 days, like maybe even 3.
I mean, that version of "I'd Rather Go Blind." I'm sorry to interrupt you. That version of "I'd Rather Go Blind" is great on there. I mean, I love a lot of the stuff that you've done together. It's so good.
And she's fearless. The great thing about Beth is she's fearless. Like, for 3 records, I would always submit Black Coffee from Humble Pie.
Yeah.
And it always would get turned down. And finally, on the last studio record we did, I finally just had to just go, can we try it?
Yeah.
And she immediately says, well, we need to lower the key. I said, but it's a non-event. Everybody lowers the key. If you can sing it in the Marriott key, and that's the event here. And she's like, I don't know if I'll do it. It's like, okay, well, I'll try it. Next thing you know, 2 takes later, everybody's going, that is unbelievable. And she nailed it in 2 takes.
And she's knocking out Steve Marriott, who has had one of the most incredible voices too, right?
Incredible. And it's a testament not only to her, but a testament to Steve Marriott, who, when Beth Hart has a hard time hitting a male voice, it tells you what a stratospheric, titanic singer Steve Marriott was. And so we did Black Coffee, and it was one of the title tracks of the records that we did, the last record we did.
Yeah.
And it was a great period of time in our lives where we were just kind of doing these songs, and we do these records in our spare time. And we did a little mini tour. We did some shows in Amsterdam, and so she's got a nice catalog of these songs now that she tours on and plays along with her original material, and she's kicking butt and doing great.
That's great. I'm glad you told me that story. I love this story about that analogy to Big Brother and Holding Company to the next band, because I knew exactly where you were going with that. Because I always felt the same way.
I felt bad, but at the time of my life, I had 2 chips on. You
were young.
Chips on both shoulders, and I was like, I was just speaking frankly, and I was like, because people have always spoke frankly to me, and I go, I wasn't paying you a compliment. We know that without Janice, Big Brother and the Holding Company had a few problems in the rhythm section and the tuning section, but
and you can hear it on Cheap Thrills.
Yeah,
you can hear it on Cheap Thrills. You can hear it on those records. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can
Exactly.
hear it even on recorded. That's for sure. But it's amazing stuff. So I got to ask you, Joe. It was cool. We were talking about love. I would love to hear you play 5 of your favorite riffs of all time and tell me why they are, because your love of music encompasses so much. Very much like myself, which is one of the things that I've always really appreciated, admired about you. So would you mind pulling out your guitar and playing some tracks?
Well, I just happen to have a guitar. I just happen to have a guitar right here.
That's fantastic.
And
that's great.
I actually happen to have a guitar that's already tuned up.
Oh, that sounds great.
And yes, for the audience, I do wear a tux coat in my own home.
Yeah.
So I just figured, it's nice to dress up.
Yeah.
For the occasion, any occasion. All right, so here's what I got, and it's not the usual suspects, but for me, first Jeff Beck Group record, Truth, to me wrote the playbook for Zeppelin 1 and maybe 2, but certainly Zeppelin 1. But Rice Pudding. It changed my life, and and another thing too, it's like when you hear "Let Me Love You, Baby," which was a cover, but that sound that Jeff got, and just change your life,
Oh yeah.
My other riff of all time, again, it's like these are just my favorites. That it's the ones you can jam on for 20 minutes and never get tired of them. Is obviously Blind Faith, the opening song.
That's such a great track. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I love that you did that, named an album after it, and did a live version of it, too. How Did It Cry Today? What a great album opener. And, it just always made me sad there was never a second album, because I love that record so much. And what a killer opener.
Killer opener. And who doesn't get a lot of credit for the guitar playing, especially on that song, is Steve Winwood. Because it sounds like Clapton's like when they're up, that it's actually both of them playing at the same time. It's not just Clapton doubling himself or just playing, two leads at the, overdubbing that. It's Steve Winwood, who's a great guitar player. He's known as an organist and a piano player and one of the greatest singers of all time, but can shred on the guitar when he wants to.
Isn't it amazing that when he was 16 doing Spencer Davis Group, singing I'm a Man and, like all those singles, Keep on Running, Give Me Some Lovin', that stuff still sounds amazing. It was hard to believe he was 16 and he had such a soulful killer voice,
and can still sing like that now.
And with Traffic, he was great too, and all that stuff.
It was just, again, he was just one of those iconic singers that when he sings, it's like where does that even come from? You're just blessed with that head voice. My other one that I will say, I know it's a lot of British stuff, but it's just stuff that you can play all day long, you can jam on that for, I don't know.
Sunshine of Your Love, as you know, right?
Sunshine of Your Love, yeah.
It's so great. And, of course, Hendrix loved it, too. He jammed on it. I mean, it's one of those songs that it's just such a classic. And, I know they had singles out, obviously, before that in the States. But as a little boy, that was the first thing I ever heard by Cream. You know what I mean? And my older brother had the Disraeli Gears album. I would hear it in the house. My brother was a young teenager. I was a little kid. And I would hear that record over and over. And it was engraved in my brain,
And they recorded it in New York with Tom Dowd, it's like on the corner of like Columbus Circle and Broadway, and I can't help when I walk there because I have a place in New York, and I live close by that original Atlantic Studio building. It's now a big hole in the ground. We're going to build condos. I'm like, no, that's where you don't understand. This is where that came from, But I guess it's progress.
Let me just tell you quickly, that's my big beef with New York, where, and I've lived there and worked there many years, is that, there's no respect for the historic places that have been there, venues, studios. I mean, thank God Electric Lady's still there, but you know what I mean. I'm always complaining about, well, how could they knock that down? How could they replace that?
You're talking to the guy who owns and rescued the Manny's Music sign from 48th Street. The big one that's 5 stories tall. I own the sign.
You have the Manny's Music sign? That's amazing.
I called them. Well, we called them and said, hey, listen, what are you going to do with the sign? They're like, well, who's asking? They said, well, Joe Bonamassa. So they go, if he wants it, he can have it. So I took it.
Oh, that's great.
And I had it restored, and it's now on display in Chattanooga. But, it would be on display in my house, but it's 5 stories tall. But somebody had to save it. Hendrix walked under that sign. So it's like, but to your point,
And you're right. And so many great artists, there were pictures taken out in front of Manny's, and how many people went there for instruments. I mean,
100%. Yeah, and like every kid who turned that corner from either 7th Avenue or whatever, you turn the corner, the first thing you saw was Manny's Music. You're like, this is the coolest block in the world, bar none. If you're a young guitar player like I was when I was 11, went down and played gigs with Danny Gatton at the Cat Club, I was like, this is, it wasn't a great neighborhood for an 11-year-old, but it was certainly cool for guitar players.
Yeah, that's amazing. So So you got a couple more for us, right?
Here's one straight out of Texas, Waiting for the Bus. ZZ Top.
Billy.
Again, one of the greatest 1-2 punches on a record. Tres Hombres, Waiting for the Bus, hard cut with an edit. Jesus Just Left Chicago. But when you hear this, it's pure Billy Gibbons, and it takes you to a place in Texas, you know. You know, and it's just, you know, he just had that tone and that feel. And then they would do. And I was like, when I first heard that, I was like, this is just outer worldly stuff, you know. And it's like, again, some of the most creative blues rock ever, you know. It's like we all start with the same guitar and the same three changes. It's like what you do with it. And, you know, Gibbons and those guys are just so far ahead of everybody, and have been for 50 more years. You know, they're still innovating and doing cool stuff.
Yeah, Billy's such a great gentleman too. He's good people, isn't he?
Good people, very
he
good.
Really
People.
is. And what great songs he's left us. I mean,
my last one is obviously a classic. You know, Albert King didn't write it, but he certainly made it famous when he went and. Sign. You know, I mean, if that doesn't encapsulate everything cool about a blues song with a heavy riff.
Yeah. What's your favorite version? Is it Cream, or do you have are there multiple? Which version?
I'm an Albert guy.
Yeah.
You know, Albert to me was the most, and Warren Haynes explained this the most eloquently to me when he goes, he's the most immaculate conception guitar player of all time, because nobody played like him before. You can study the blues until you're an old person and never find someone who bend like that and had that, you know, that take, you know. You know, he had all those bends. And one of the theories is because he was a drummer. His name was Albert Nelson, and he played drums on some Jimmy Reed records, and then decided to become Albert King, the Albert King that we all know and love, and he just was able to just with a lightning bolt straight to your soul on every song, you know. Yeah. And Born Under a Bad Sign, to me, with the Stax band, obviously, you know, with, you know, all the cats that were, you know, Booker T and the MGs.
Yeah, Steve Cropper, all those guys, right?
Cropper on guitar, you can hear him, you know, and Albert's just killing it, you know.
Yeah, so good. Love all those recordings, you know. So I'm glad that stuff is that's amazing. That's a great run of 5 riffs right there. Now,
it's not the usual suspects, but they're mine.
But I like that. I think it's great that it's, you know, it's your own personal favorites. You know, one of the cool things. Let's talk about the you know, your foundation. The Blues Foundation is such a cool thing to do. Can you tell everybody about that? Because I think it's just all the things that you do with it to help other musicians is so important.
Well, you know, we've been doing our Keeping the Blues Alive foundation, and we've been doing some cruises for the last 7 years to raise money for it. And the original mission was 100% music education. If schools will call up and say, hey, listen, we need guitar strings, we need a grant, we need a guitar program, we got you covered. During the pandemic stuff, we definitely pivoted, and we were helping musicians directly who were affected by work stoppage. You know, and that's, you know, we've cut over 250 checks to artists and acts, and it doesn't matter if you're blues or not. You could be heavy metal, you could be hip hop. It doesn't matter. We're helping you out because, you know, we're all on the road doing the same thing, only to a different audience. And, you know, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is the fact that we were able to raise over $500,000, give it all away last year, and then we've raised probably equal to more of that in the past 6 or 7 years and given it all to schools. It's just because I'm a lucky dude, you know, and I feel like the need to give back, and I feel the need to help, you know, bolster the community. Like, the more people that are involved in blues, the more people are involved in touring and music, I think the better society is. I mean, it's the great universal language, and it's the great binder of people. It crosses political boundaries, God almighty, with that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like you look out into an audience of 2,000 people, and they're all enjoying music, and they could be diametrically opposed to, on their views on politics in the world, but they all agree that they like music. And to me, that's the great binder that reminds me that we are one humanity, not these separate humanities that are, So that's part of the reason why we do the charity, and it's a labor of love, and it's helped a lot of folks.
Yeah, it really has. I think it's great. Now, I'm excited about your show that's coming up at the Greek, which is next Sunday. But I want to talk about the NFT thing is pretty amazing. I saw that what you were doing with the NFT was very different than what other people are doing. And the NFT, for some of the people watching, is definitely something that's involved with crypto. It's a whole new cyber way of kind of buying into, original content and creative things. And yours comes with a real physical aspect to it, where there's a guitar involved. Right. And a song. It's really cool for some of the people that are watching us and listening. Can you explain a little bit of that to them, Joe? Because I think it's cool what you're doing. What you're doing is you're giving them an experience that's something that's tangible, as well as it's both. So can you explain that to everybody?
Okay, yeah. The NFT thing is basically what we did was I created a song. I produced it myself, wrote it. And there's artwork, there's all the things that go along with a song, a single. And what it is what you're buying on the NFT side is one song record company. You own the publishing, you own the rights to it. Obviously, there will be, I'll have something to say if I don't like where it's being licensed. I can say you can't license it to that particular thing, because obviously it's my name. But you're free to license it. You own the publishing to it. You own the song. You own everything. You own the footage of it being recorded. And the one thing that, because we started riffing on this, was like there was a lot of NFTs, and there was like some skepticism about NFTs to begin with. But what happens if it's worth zero? So that was one of the things we riffed on, was what happens if it's worth zero? Well, I'm a pretty infamous guitar collector. I have a lot of guitars, and I have a lot of very nice guitars. And I said, well, just as an experiment, let's see if I throw in one of these and the amp that I recorded on, that to an investor or anybody thinking about getting involved in an NFT, it's like creating a de facto gold standard. Like the guitar itself, it's a 59 Sunburst Les Paul, which is a very valuable guitar. And they've always been valuable through recessions and whatever. They've always been valuable. So what we did was, with the NFT, you get the guitar and the amp, which basically creates a de facto gold standard to where your NFT there's no chance it will ever zero out in value. And that's the reason why we did that, is because it's the first of its kind. And I like that idea of being a first of its kind. The proof of concept with this, if it sells, it's still an if, is it will allow musicians and artists, and this is one of the biggest things why I did it in the first place. It will allow musicians and artists to self-fund and not be adherent to the funding of a traditional model record label, and they will not be kind of handcuffed to this thing. Well, I'd like to do this. I have these great ideas, and I've gotten to the end of Instagram and Patreon, and I still don't have enough money to really finance this. What do I do to make it to the next step, get it up another couple steps on the ladder? The NFT allows you to raise capital with your art in a way that will not, that Patreon can't, YouTube, royalties and God forbid, streaming royalties. You couldn't raise that kind of capital that fast. And the idea is to show musicians and artists and anybody who's betting on themselves and trying to get a career going and funding that career, because it does take money to fund it, that you could raise capital to invest in yourself. So that's why we did it. And we partnered up with Heritage Auctions, in Dallas, Texas, and it gets auctioned off the same day as Neil Sean's guitars, which he's got a lot of great guitars too. So that day, I think it's July 30th. Is there's a lot of great guitars coming up for auction, and this NFT thing that I think, if it works, will be a proof of concept to other artists to self-fund their careers, which is basically what we've been doing for the last 20 years.
I think it's great. You always have, and I love the direction you've always taken things in. Those guys from Heritage Auctions, I met those guys recently at a record show. They're really nice people, and they were showing me all the stuff that they do. They have all those books and catalogs. They're really cool for people watching to check out some of the stuff that they have and that they've sold off. I mean, I got to tell you, Joe.
Premier auction house, and they do a lot with posters, and they do everything from coins to posters to wine to guitars. You know, they're a big deal.
Joe, I got to tell you, I enjoyed having this conversation with you so much, and I could continue to do it for hours. I love talking music with you, talking about your music, and because and I've always liked that because you're always been so genuine. That's the thing that I love about you, and besides loving your music, is just that you really say what you think, and you've always stuck to your guns, and I think that's one of the things that's so cool. Like I said, 24 studio blues albums at number one, right?
Yeah.
I
mean, it's the most in history of the charts. Who would have thought, Matt? Back when you did the EPK.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that's 21 years ago.
My fans have been so good to me,
Yeah, and it's your fans love you, and I just want to tell you, congratulations on all the things that you've been able to accomplish over the years, and it's just great to catch up with you again and get to talk to you. It really is. And to talk about this new record, which is really cool. Now Serving Royalty live at the Ryman Auditorium, however you consume music, you should definitely check it out. It's really great. But Joe, this was awesome. We're gonna have to definitely hang out sometime. I hope.
Well, dude, we live it. We live in LA. We love the place. It's a sunny place for shady people, but they're our kind of people.
They are, absolutely. Joe, I'll make sure we figure out a way to get in touch and hang sometime. I love that.
I would love to. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you.
Yeah, Joe, it was great catching up with you. All right, I'll see you soon.
All right, cheers, guys. Thank you.
Take care. That was great, Joe. Joe Bonamassa, everybody. What an incredible guitar player, an incredible human being, and man, love talking music with him. He's just so knowledgeable and an incredible player. Just one of the best. So I hope you enjoyed it. My name's Matt Pinfield. Thanks for watching. This is KLOS, new and approved.